no one really cares about what I want until I somehow tie that into what they want, because we all want something. Everyone listening to this wants something. Every person in the world is walking around with a whole bundle of wants. So we all want something. So my whole thing is make sure that your give is equal to or greater than your want. Then people will like you because you're not parasitical. You are a producer. You're not a parasite. So definitely walk through the world as a producer, not a parasite.
Welcome back to another episode of Unstoppable Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Michael Crane. Today, I got a really special guest, Joe Polish. I'm so excited to learn about everything that you're doing, Joe, and just really for you to share some of your story with the audience, because, you know, my story is overcoming adversity, and anybody that I meet who's been through really challenging times, you know, I feel like it's almost like a responsibility once we've recovered or transcended those times to share how we did it with others, because there's so many people out there that just maybe feel stuck or hopeless at times. And I want to be a source of inspiration for them, just like you do. So thank you for joining me today, man. I know you're super busy. Let's dive right into it. You know, I mean, you're wearing the Genius Recovery shirt. So before maybe I ask you questions about your past and how you got here, can you share about the Genius Network and what you've created? It's really special.
Yeah, so Genius Network is a connection network of high-level entrepreneurs that all make at least $1 million a year, which is definitely not where I started. I started as a broke entrepreneur, and I learned how to build stuff. And it's a connection network. It started out as a mastermind. We started Genius Network back in 2006. Prior to that, it was called the Genius Network Interview Series because I was interviewing people. I started interviewing people back in 1996 because I started my marketing company in 1994. So I've been doing this for 30 years. And then I started my first coaching group in 1998. And so I always would bring entrepreneurs and people together. And then Genius Network became, one of the first super high level groups, and when I say high level, not inexpensive to join. It was it's $35,000 a year now, and then we have $100,000 a year group. But it's about health, wealth, and elf. So health is mental and physical health, not just being in physical shape, but mentally dealing with your addictions, dealing with the boundaries that you put around yourself, dealing with workaholism, which is the respectable addiction. And so we look at health. And then wealth, not just making money, but not losing it, which are two different skill sets. And then what I call ELF, which is easy, lucrative, and fun, doing things that are easy, lucrative, and fun, people, projects, strategies, and have an ELF business versus a half business, which is hard, annoying, lame, and frustrating. So that's the acronym. It could oftentimes be hard, annoying, lucrative, and frustrating. So people come to Genius Network, and it is a tribe of tribal leaders. I focus on industry transformers. Those are people that are the best in the world at what they do, or one of the best in the world at what they do. And if you bring those types of people together with good food, good location, good conversations, amazing things happen. Good people, a group is only as good as the quality of the members and the culture that's within it. And so I guess with all that stuff I would say about it, what I attempt to do, Sean, is I try to create the most non-narcissistic group of givers that are achievement focused, and let them come with their problems, challenges, and opportunities, their ambitions, their messes, and come up with reasons to have them in a room talking with each other so that they could have a sounding board of other industry transformers. And I think that in order to have a genius network, you need to be a genius networker, and you need to do genius networking, which means a genius network is a group of people with skills and capabilities. Even though I have a group in a business called Genius Network, I recommend that all people have a genius network, not just network with people. Networking is like an old word where, go out and pass out business cards, go out and meet people. The way we approach it is be very selective with who you are giving your time, attention, money, effort, and energy to, because that's what we can spend. Because if you're a driven entrepreneur, as you know, there's a million opportunities. There's so many things that a person can do, but what you have to ask, is the juice worth the squeeze? If I'm going to take everything you say yes to, you say no to something else. So a Genius Network could be used for health. It could be used for parenting. It could be used for a spiritual program. It could be used for writing a book, building a website, building a business. And so I just happen to bring the right who's together, and then they meet each other, and then they do stuff together. Just like what we're doing with Unstoppable 365. It's a Genius Network of really smart people, and you're one of them. Dr. J's one of them. Whitney Jones is one of them. So it's bringing together really smart people. And when you bring smart people together, great things happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. There's a lot there to unpack that you just shared. I love what you were saying about like when you get similar people together and you have good food, good conversations, and like good people, magic happens, right? That's like a really cool formula. And it makes sense, right? Eating good food, having those good conversations. And it's like just getting that creativity going. But the power in relationships has changed my life so much, especially in the last year, like meeting you, meeting Whitney, meeting Tommy. I worked so hard for such a long period of time just to build myself up. So when I got into a room, I could bring value, and for the longest time, and I still am, I'm just going to be a student. I'm always going to be absorbing information, learning and implementing. But I heard someone share this and I want to get your take on it. They say that, your time should be segmented into like three segments of 30%, really. Like 30% of the people you're around, you want them to be, I guess, further behind you on the journey so you can mentor and teach them. 30% at your level so you can collaborate, and then 30% who are ahead of you so you can continuously learn and grow. Would you say that's accurate, and how maybe you've spent your time to get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about that right now as you say that. If that's how I would frame it, or if, I think it sounds definitely reasonable. If you're one thing I will tell you about expertise, because you said being a student, I am always a student. I really try to approach things with a beginner's mind. When you're at the level where you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. I mean, we started saying that in Genius Network, and now I hear people saying it everywhere. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I just want to be in a room where everyone's getting smarter. I mean, we were saying that years ago, and it's true. And I don't ever want to be a sage from the stage. I want to be a guide from the side. That's a way to, I have people in my group, as an example, that are infinitely more intelligent and more capable than me in all kinds of different areas. And if I ever got to the point where I think I'm the smartest person and I'm not willing to hang out with people that are brighter than me, smarter than me, then for one, I'm arrogant. I think I know it all, which is stupid, because the moment you start believing your own PR, that's when things are going to go downhill, or you're about to have a rude awakening. Secondly, it feels good to teach other people. I mean, if you learn something, I mean, knowledge and intelligence and value and skills is not like fine china where you don't pull it out except when there's a special occasion. I mean, if you're really smart or you're really capable in a particular area, then share it with other people. And if you're dumb or you're ignorant or you're trying to learn something else, be willing to admit that and find other people that can help you with that. Because what's expertise anyway? I mean, it's just happening to know more about a particular area than somebody else. And so, you've seen this happen many times where someone is holding court or someone's really smart, and you got a bunch of people that are looking up to this person, and then someone else that comes in and like they're at a whole nother level of just understanding or skill or capability. And you see posturing and all that sort of bullshit that starts happening. And it usually happens with mostly younger males, and I mean, it happens with everyone. But you'll see people with their Lamborghinis or their cars or their wealth or their external forms of status. If you've got no depth or substance to who you are as a person, you can get away with that stuff. I mean, you can do showmanship. People can go for years putting on their metaphorically speaking, their costumes. But ultimately, when you're around people of real substance, real integrity, real value, you get exposed very quickly. So I think always starting with the beginner's mind, knowing that what your, what is your circle of competence. Because I mean, there's some things. I used to talk with Gary Halbert, who's this crazy copywriter that I learned a lot of marketing from early on in my career. And we would say, when God was doling out brains, we got 98% of our brains on how to develop a marketing campaign and the other 2% on how to run the rest of our lives. So, I'm really good at some things, but there's a lot of stuff I know nothing about. But the beauty is there's a lot of smart people in the world. There's a lot of great books. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of things that you can go and develop and have skills with. So I think learning third is probably a good way to look at it. And I will say this. One of my favorite books is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
And I never would have wrote my latest book. I've written 5 books. 2 of them are on addiction recovery. One's on marketing. One's just a whole variety of different things. My sort of musings on life and fitness and health and different things. That's the Life Gives to the Giver book. And then my latest book is called What's in It for Them. And it's a question I ask about everything. No one really cares about what I want until I somehow tie that into what they want, because we all want something. Everyone listening to this wants something. Every person in the world is walking around with a whole bundle of wants. So we all want something. So my whole thing is make sure that your give is equal to or greater than your want. Then people will like you because you're not parasitical. You are a producer. You're not a parasite. So definitely walk through the world as a producer, not a parasite. So the reason I bring up Dale Carnegie is the book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great book. Great. I mean, tons of valuable methodologies in that book. What I've learned, though, it's not just about winning friends and influencing people. It's about winning the right friends and influencing the right people. So with third, the thing to look out for is alignment, because they may not be as intelligent as you. You may be smarter than them. They may be equal. But the real key is, are you aligned? Do you have a shared value system? Because my latest book is, most people think they're buying a book on how to meet people, to reach opportunities and learn how to get ahead in life. And it certainly has many strategies and methods on how to connect with people and how to meet people and meet famous people and what to say if you're kind of stuck and all that sort of stuff. But the real message behind it, which I don't make very obvious in the book, and it hopefully comes through as people go through it, is it's not about capabilities, it's about character. You can have all the capabilities in the world and be a real piece of shit as a human. And do shitty things. I mean, when I was a drug addict, I wasn't the most honorable human. In order to be an addict, you have to lie, you have to cheat, you have to steal. There's no true addict and even if you're not lying or cheating and stealing from others, you're doing it to yourself. And that's how you end up in bad situations. And so, yeah. So I mean, I've definitely had life level me many times when I thought I was so smart.
That's probably why you have such an amazing perspective. I'm sitting here listening to you, and it's like a master class on how to be a great human being, which in turn creates success when you do it consistently over time. Like one of the things that really stands out is I guess being humble, like knowing what you're worth, but not thinking that the stuff defines you, but knowing that like the value you bring to people's lives and just continuously being a good person is more important. That's kind of what I took out of some of what you just said. Which I really love, because I think nowadays, like especially with social media, everyone's trying to compare themselves to others, or they think they need the stuff to be successful. And it's kind of like pulling people away from what really counts. And that's the way you impact people, and doing it because you have the right intentions and motives. And I love that. You said like basically the name of your new book is What's in It for Them. That perspective is so life-changing if you can apply it consistently. And I too love Dale Carnegie's book. I read his book when I was incarcerated. I was just so fascinated by all these different personal development books, and I wanted to read everything I can get my hands on. And the 2 things that stood out to me the most that I remember today is the first of all, if you want to persuade someone to do something that is good for them, or you're trying to like move them along, let's say it's in a sales call or something, you want them to think of it as their own idea. Like your goal is to get them to have that thought swell within themselves. Then they take ownership of it. And then number 2 is like, people always love to hear their own name repeated back to them. So whether you're out at a restaurant, it's a waiter or a waitress, or someone you're doing business with, like if you can consistently do that, you kind of win their favor over a little bit. I thought those were some interesting strategies, but I have a couple questions for you. You also brought up your struggles with addiction too. Like, how did you get sober? Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like you completely healed yourself and eradicated your addiction, or what's your philosophy behind recovery?
Yeah, my current state right now, and I often say this because I've interviewed people that I consider the top addiction minds, experts in the world. And some of these are not people that are quote unquote book authors or have made themselves famous. I mean, Dr. Drew wrote the foreword to one of my addiction recovery books, The Miracle Morning for Addiction Recovery, which I did with Anna David and Hal Elrod, because Hal wanted me to do a Miracle Morning book on addiction because so many people were using that for recovery, but he didn't have a recovery book. So I went to my dear friend, Anna David, who's written, multiple books on recovery and has been in recovery for many years. We got Dr. Drew to write the foreword. Gabor Mate is a dear friend of mine. He's one of the top addiction minds in the world. So I've heard a lot of different definitions of what is addiction and how do you deal with sobriety and the craving brain and all of the stuff that goes into it. The way that I view it is, have I overcome it or have I eradicated it? In my current state, I would say no one does. And I'll describe what I mean by that. And I also say this, that I'm always open to being proven wrong. I come from a place that 10 years from now, I may look back and say, man, I remember when I was doing that podcast with Sean, and I can't believe I said that stupid shit because I wasn't, knowledgeable enough, or I wasn't at a level where my consciousness was developed to where I could actually understand what the hell it even meant. So in the current state of addiction, which is very tricky, I don't believe addiction is a disease. It definitely is dis-ease, if you wanted to put DIS-ease, because you're definitely not in a state of ease when you're struggling with addiction. I believe addiction is a solution to pain. It is it's not a good solution, but in the moment, drugs, sex, alcohol, gambling, gaming, work, food, codependency, all of the different ways we can scratch the itch, they soothe pain. My friend Gabor Mate says, the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. So if right now my life is pretty good, if I got a tremendous amount of stress, if I had a lot of loss around me, my brain starts craving things that are going to make it feel good. Sometimes it's food. So let's just take substance as an example, because my core addiction was sex addiction, and I'll describe that to whatever degree you'd like me to. Because when people hear that, it conjures up sex addiction. Does that mean you're like constantly wanting sex? A lot of sexual addiction is the inability to be sexual. It's sexual anorexia. It's not able to express yourself sexually. So, but I became a sex addict predominantly because I was raped and molested as a child. My mother died when I was 4. I had no real connection in sexual addiction. Is probably not the best way to describe it, but it's an intimacy disorder. But almost every form of addiction is a connection disorder. You just are disconnected, and you don't feel good because of either the traumas that you've had, or my friend Dr. Anna Lemke does a masterful job of explaining the biochemical aspects of addiction. She wrote a book called Dopamine Nation. People can watch interviews with her on Joe Rogan, on Andrew Huberman. My interview I did with her, we're getting ready to put up. She wrote a brilliant book. She's an addiction doctor at Stanford. So trauma and biochemistry is what manifests itself as addiction. Like if you don't have enough serotonin, you're going to look for ways to feel better. If you're constantly staring at screens and you're getting all your dopamine from all the fear porn through the news and through social media, you're training your brain to be a constant dopamine seeking machine. And people think of dopamine as oftentimes like it's a pleasure neurotransmitter. It's really not. It's an anticipation. So being in a state of constant anticipation is difficult. So to eradicate that, the way that I look at recovery, being in recovery versus being recovered, is you no longer have and again, I'm only using my terminology, so I know this may not relate to everybody. So like they say in 12-step groups, take what you like and leave the rest. So hopefully, hopefully I'm saying something in a way that someone can resonate with, but it's like this, the state of the craving brain from, the addict is you're pursuing something because you don't feel good in your current state. And so when I'm at a place now in my life where I have less of a draw. I don't white knuckle that much. Once in a while I do. Once in a while I have a craving. For instance, the number one killer of substances in America and in many parts of the world is sugar. More people die from sugar-related things than any other substance. The second is tobacco. The third is alcohol. And the fourth are opiates. That's what kills more people. 90% of the global population consumes caffeine every day. Not a lot of people are not, dying because of coffee consumption, but every bit of these biochemistries. I mean, pre-pandemic, 20% of American women were on antidepressants. Now it's much further. We are a society that is consuming substances that alter our consciousness, that inebriate us. And a lot of it is done through escapism. So if I have a tremendous amount of pain or angst or stress, I'm certainly going to look for a way to scratch the itch. When it becomes an addiction is doing something that you want to do or you don't want to do that has negative consequences that you cannot stop. So oftentimes, you want to get high, you want to have sex. Other times you don't want to do it because there's these consequences, but you can't stop yourself. It's beyond choice. And it's like something has possessed you in a lot of ways. And so that's why, so you use the term sobriety. I had gotten sober I was a cocaine addict. My first real addiction that was making my life completely unmanageable was when I started as a teenager. And when I was 18 years old, I became a bit out of control. There was 1 month after high school, and throughout my senior year, I was taking speed, smoking pot every day, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes. I'd taken LSD probably 75 times before the age of 18. I mean, I was doing everything, crystal meth, I mean, you name it, but not tremendous amounts because I was in high school. I didn't have a ton of money, but I was doing a lot of drugs. And then out of high school, I became a drug dealer because that's how I supported my drug habit. And there was one period of time where 3.5 months I freebased cocaine, where you smoke it every single day for 3.5 months. There was not a day that I missed. And there was 1 week where I had not eaten hardly anything. And at the time, on average, I weighed 120 pounds. So if you're male and you're 5'10", that's pretty fucking skinny. And there was 1 week where I had hardly eaten anything. I was just getting high every night, ton of amphetamines. And I weighed myself and I weighed 105 pounds and I looked like a freaking anorexic skeleton. And people would say to me, like friends, that I was very much isolating myself. So at that stage, everyone I hung out with was doing drugs. Because when you're, Chris Rock did this skit years ago. He's like, well, if you're a crackhead, you're hanging out with other crackheads. It's not like you're hanging out with someone in a 3-piece suit that's waking up at 5 a.m. I mean, so it's, all my relationships revolved around getting high. And I would wake up with the desire to get high, and I would get high to go to bed. And when I say get high, I would do uppers in the morning, downers at night, drink myself into oblivion just to try to pass out. And I'd wake up with this fucked up life, but I could not get out of it. And so the way that I got sober is without turning, I could talk for an hour just on this stage of my life, but I gathered up my stuff when I looked at myself and said, if I don't leave, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to die. I'm literally, and I was very suicidal during that time. I had guns in my mouth many times. I mean, there was, it was bad. And it's not like I wanted to be in that place. I just could not get out of it. It was just so freaking painful. And so the reason I do stuff in recovery now, and as it's real human suffering. I mean, it is awful. And I got into a piece of crap pickup truck that I had, and I drove to New Mexico, and I lived in a trailer with my father for 2 years. But the first 6 months was grueling. I was taking Tylenol and aspirin, and I just didn't have any access to drugs. I had to remove myself from access. I didn't go through a treatment center. It was hard. I white knuckled it, and I did it a bit cold turkey. I couldn't have done that if I was an opiate addict, because then you need medical care. But there were, I was pretty sick. 6 months almost daily, just pounding headaches. So I quit doing drugs, and then I started working out in the gym, and I got in better physical shape. And then I learned how to sell gym memberships, and I got into the body, and I started physically transforming myself. It was amazing. And then I met a guy at this gym that was a member that offered me a job at a mental health facility, and I went to work at this mental hospital, and I would drive the adult patients to AA meetings, which is Alcoholics Anonymous, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, CA, Cocaine's Anonymous. And I would sit in on these meetings as an employee who driving a van of addicts in an inpatient center to outside 12-step meetings several times a week. And I would just sit in on these meetings, never realizing how damn valuable that was becoming to my life. And so I got sober from drugs, and I came back to Arizona after a couple of years, and I was in better physical shape. I mean, best physical shape I've been in my life, because I was never into sports. I had a sadistic little league coach that ruined my liking of sports when I was a kid. And but I was sober. But here's the thing. Great book by Ernie Larson, Second Stage Sobriety. So most people think of sobriety as quit drinking or doing the drugs or whatever the behavior is. That's first stage recovery. So second stage recovery is, Ernie, I think it's second stage recovery, is where first stage is when you stop the behavior or the substances. Second stage is dealing with the underlying issues that cause you to drink or drug or behave, or what the behavior is in the first place, which is almost always about your ability to have relationships with other people. So when I talk about connection, I mean, if there's one word that encompasses what I'm trying to do with my life, is create connection networks, connect people with each other, connect. But here's the thing, it's really hard, if not impossible, to connect with others if you're disconnected with yourself. So if you don't learn how to connect with yourself, or connect with nature, or connect with something beyond our own selfish carnal desires, which are very strong, then it's hard to enjoy life. And so it took me years. And so I got sober from doing drugs, still drank a little bit. I was never an alcoholic. But I quit doing cocaine. I quit doing hard drugs, and my life improved, but I was still in a state of angst. I learned how to do business. I learned marketing. I became a millionaire before the age of 30. I transformed the entire carpet cleaning and restoration industry. I had 12,000 cleaning and restoration companies all over the world that had become members of my organization. I ran a good business. I provided good stuff. I mean, to this day, I have relationships with so many of those people, but I never dealt with the underlying core addiction, which was sex addiction. And that was a bitch. That was really hard, because there's so much shame attached to it, even when you say the words, and so I joined high profile groups. I went to lots of 12-step meetings. And when I say high profile groups, because I was making enough money, I could go into rooms where, really skilled therapists and lots of famous people, Academy Award winning actors and actresses, NBA players, NFL players, clergy, politicians, musicians that I listened to their music growing up. And here I am in a room of a bunch of famous people struggling with addiction. And what I also learned is that you can't buy recovery by itself, meaning, it's like Jim Rohn says, you can't pay someone to do your push-ups for you. It got me in the room. It gave me some intellectual knowledge, but I also learned that some of the best recovery is oftentimes free. Just go to a freaking, as the saying goes, to a 12-step group in a basement of a church. You can often find recovery not by trying to buy the smartest people. Because I learned how to get into the rooms with smart people. And you know what? My ego really thought I was fucking cool. My ego really thought I knew what the hell I was doing. And I still struggled a lot. It helped, but it didn't solve it. It didn't solve it till I really, till I dealt with, I had to hear this line so many times until it finally sunk in, which is, you're as sick as your secrets. And I would tell some of the secrets, but I wouldn't tell all of them. And silent battles are the hardest battles to fight. You can be surrounded by people. You can be admired by millions, because I sat in rooms with people that the world loved and adored them, and they were in such anguish. They were so spiritually starving. And I didn't know how to connect with God. My mother was a former nun. I grew up Catholic. I was abused in church. I had people, manipulate me and gaslight me under the guise of God. It's really hard to connect and believe in a God when you're in a place worshiping and you're getting abused. Real fucking confusing when you're a kid, or anyone for that matter. So I had a hard time with the whole God concept. Even to this day, I don't care if someone's an atheist. What I care about is they're a good human. Are they connected? one of my favorite lines from Bill W., the founder of AA, is as alcoholics, we're trying to drink God out of a bottle. But even if you don't believe in God or don't believe in, whatever you think God may be, most people can understand its source. It's some sort of connection, and it has to be beyond yourself. It could be nature, it could be others, it could be family, it could be animals, it could be a purpose. But it's really the ego. We're not built to be isolated creatures. We're built to be connected with something greater than ourselves. And so, but I'm not a 12-step big book thumper like some people are. 12 steps is only one of the many valuable things. The beauty of 12 steps is they make connection and they make community available to people, and they're widespread and they're predominantly free. It's voluntary contributions, but 12 steps deal with nothing related to trauma unless you meet someone there and you talk about it. And they don't talk about food and nutrition. So you'll be at a lot of 12-step groups where people are guzzling sodas and coffees and eating donuts and shitty food and all that. And that's fine. I'd rather they do that than, heroin or, other things that are more difficult. But I'll say a couple more things and I'll shut up. And I'm sorry for going on.
No, this is good. This is good.
So the thing with the sexual addiction was I heard this definition of intimacy by a guy that a friend of mine, Tim, who has written books now on recovery. Tim Ringgold, he wrote Sonic Recovery, and great guy. He's a music therapist, plays music to people dying in hospice centers, runs grief retreats. But when he came to his first 12-step meeting, and we both publicly talk about this now, I 12-stepped him, which means you explain how the program works. And that was, 2003. And he introduced me to a guy many years later that he said, you should talk to this guy. And he was an 80-year-old gay man that devotes his life to voluntarily to help people that struggle with sexual addiction. And he defined intimacy. And he said, intimacy is a mutual exploration of a shared safe place. Abuse is anything that takes away the safe place. And addictions are what we do to make ourselves feel good when we don't have a safe place. And so if you don't feel safe in the world, you're going to look for a way to scratch the itch. And if you are ever sexually abused, then your engagement in sexuality is never safe. And so how do you have, the desire or the craving to be connected to someone sexually, intimately, but that represents danger, that represents dysfunction. And so sexual addiction is a very complicated thing. The drug of choice for many high-level CEOs is sex addiction. There's so many people that watch porn, that pay for sex, that, have unhealthy sexual stuff. It's very complicated. And there's so much shame attached to it because no one talks about it in a healthy manner unless you're in, recovery rooms. And so we have a very, in the world of everything that's been going on the last few years, most people on the planet don't feel safe. And so so what is addiction? It's a connection disorder. So addiction is through the roof right now. Now, I know I'm talking a lot about addiction, but I also have a whole nother side of my life, which is, business and marketing. So what I try to do now is take my marketing skills, which is, and my influence skills, because what is selling? Selling is influence. And what is marketing? It's storytelling. So, part of it is I want to use these skills to be a hero to people that are struggling with addiction. So my friend Dan Sullivan, he has, who do you want to be a hero to? I want to be a hero to entrepreneurs, and I want to be a hero to people that struggle with addiction, because I am both of those things. And so that's why I spend about half my time helping people that struggle with addiction. I've never taken a penny from my foundation. I don't know if I ever will. I fortunately am in a position where I can, support a lot of stuff because I do have businesses that make money. And it'd be a real damn shame with what I know about it to not use these skills for that sort of stuff. And I also want to say, I get a lot of nice accolades that people say to me. And I also, just for my own sanity, it's not because I'm some philanthropic angel. I mean, I still struggle with a lot of shit. And I do it because it makes me feel good. I do it because it helps me in my own recovery. And you can't keep it if you don't give it away. And so when I write books like Life Gives to the Giver, I very little about addiction. I talk about addiction a bit in there, but it's not, I don't try to lord people over with what what is most important to me. This is certainly the most important thing to me. I'll say that here. But it's not everyone's thing. And so whatever someone wants to take a stand for, whatever's important to you, whatever suffering, whatever problems that you see in the world, get behind it in a way that, it's not draining you, but it's expanding you. Because I try to do things now with people and with topics and with subjects that expand me and don't contract me. And if I'm really contracted and there's a lot of stress, yeah, man, I'm going to look for a way to scratch the itch. I mean, if you're depressed, if you're lonely, if you're sad, if you're hurting, there's nothing wrong with wanting to feel better. The problem is, how do you scratch the itch? Believe me, like, I could go into rumination of sexual stuff or parties. When I was partying, it feels pretty freaking intense to go out and get really high. It's in the moment, it feels pretty good. That's why people do so many drugs. But there's this thing called consequences, and it can really destroy your life. And believe me, I mean, people sort of behave to the degree of the negative consequences. And over the years, I've really tried my best to develop, the patience muscle, to develop the fact that those things that seem so tantalizing and so seductive and so awesome, these fantasies that we all have, life is never as good as the fantasy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it exceeds it, but it's really rare. It's really rare. And so whenever I meet people that exceed who I thought they were, I try to develop relationships with them. Whenever I find, I feel better in the middle of a really good yoga class when I can feel connected to just feeling good than I do putting together $1 million business deal. I mean, we need to do both of those, though. It's not one instead of the other. I mean, I love Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I think he's one of the few legitimate spiritual gurus that writes books. I think most of them are full of shit. Not all. There's a lot of great people, but there's a lot that are just, they're just con artists. But I've never read anyone that's like, I read The Power Now and I went out and made $1 million. It's a little more than that. Getting into a state of presence, meditate, Ray Dalio. You familiar with Ray Dalio?
Yeah.
So I was talking to Ray at a TED conference. I don't know how many years ago this was, maybe like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and in Vancouver. And I said, I go, what do you think has been the single most important thing for your financial success and your business success? And he's like, TM, transcendental meditation. He's like,
wow,
nothing has helped me more than that. But it's not just that, because there's a lot of people that meditate that don't put all the other pieces together. So like anything else, there's not just one secret. There's not just one thing. There's a series of things. So in order to get sober and stay sober real quickly, since, community, I've never seen a true addict recover in isolation. So you got to have some sort of tribe. It could be 12 steps. It could be a group of trusted people, but your secrets, your secrets. You got to disclose to people that are trusted. That is way different than doing a Facebook confessional. I warn people, don't go out and just fucking tell everyone for the first time and admit a bunch of shit on Facebook. There's a little bit of a disconnection there. Do it with, find some trusted support. And it's out there. It's a lot of it that's out there. Walk into a 12-step room if you don't know where to go. They're free, and they're for every type of, thing you can imagine. The second is it's biochemical. It's food. It's nutrition. It's exercise. It's the stuff that you teach people. It's the stuff that we're doing at Unstoppable 365. If anyone, has not gone there, unstoppable365.com. It's a group of people that will help you with, your gut, with your diet, with your macros, with your exercise, with your water intake, with your sleep, with your sunshine, with your nutrition, with your mindset. All those things are bundled together. The third is the underlying trauma work. That's where, EMDR, somatic therapy, breathing, meditation, the proper, and I emphasize the proper use of plant medicines and psychedelics, because there's a lot of dangerous people that are running around calling themselves shaman that are putting people in really vulnerable situations. But there's other places. Unfortunately, most of the journeys, other than currently in some states psilocybin and ketamine, is illegal. So if you're going to do this stuff legally, you got to go to another country, right? Or you got to do it under the, some places like in Austin will do military and law enforcement will, under a church, they'll do medicine journeys and things like that. But psilocybin, MDMA, ibogaine, ayahuasca, those can all be very valuable with the right setting, which is a term from Timothy Leary in the 50s. But, going with the right mindset in the right setting and have someone that can help be a really valuable guide, incredible for certain types of trauma. And then the fourth is the environment, based on the rat park studies that Bruce Alexander did back in the 70s, where if you put a rat or a mouse in a cage with drugs by themselves, they will take drugs over food, over sex, over sleep, because they're isolated in a cage. But if you put it into a cage with other rats where they could have companionship and sex and blue balls and red balls and, rat paradise, he called it rat park, then give them the choice of regular water and drugged water, they won't drink the drug water. The rats instinctually know it's dangerous. And even if you give them drugs for which he tested for 30 days, 60 days and get them quote unquote addicted, they will still not drink the drug water unless they are severely traumatized. So, if you're, and again, if people want to understand it at a way better, depth than can be shared in, here, read Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke, read In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts by Gabor Mate, look at anything we have at geniusrecovery.org, because, my books, Understanding Addiction Recovery, is one of my books that we give away. You can download that for free at Genius Recovery, stuff like that. But there's great resources. But there's 4 things. So when someone says to me, I found the one way to get sober, well, you found a way. In some ways work for some people and not for others. I mean, Sean, it's weird because I happen to get involved in a topic that is one of the most complicated things.
Yeah.
It's not so damn cut and dry. I mean, there are ways, but I mean, I meet a lot of addicts that actually think they're in recovery, and there's you're doing parts of it, but there's a lot that's missing, and I have to question myself too.
Well, that's why I asked you too, and I appreciate everything you shared, because I'm sitting here listening, taking notes, because I've been sober 12 years, and I'm just always fascinated. I think the old saying, there's more than one ways to skin a cat, definitely applies, because it's so multifaceted, but what you shared about community, biochemical, and then the underlying trauma, that seems to check all the boxes. How people do it could be a little different, but just your journey, man, and how you literally left that environment and went to New Mexico is incredible. Most people can't summon the willpower and the ability to do that when they're in such a dark place. It's literally a miracle in my eyes. I know a lot of really amazing people who didn't make it out, Joe. A lot of my family members, my dad went through similar trauma as you, and he passed away 2.5 years ago from an opiate overdose. I lost my mom when I was away. My uncle, so many of my family members, they had such a brilliant, amazing side of them, but it was suppressed because they couldn't face the trauma. They couldn't transcend it. And especially the part about the embarrassment and the shame, what's worse than having that stuff happen to you is then having to talk about it or other people knowing it, kind of type of thing. Right.
No, shame is this weird dark cloud. There is no addiction that does not exist with shame and codependency and trying to cover it up, because it's guilt is I feel bad. Shame is on some level fundamentally believing I am bad. And if you feel you are bad, then how do you come to the assistance of something that's bad or a person that's bad? And it's this internal identity that we develop as addicts that are I've done something I'm shameful of, or I'm a piece of shit. And most of this stems from childhood trauma. And I'm sorry about the people that you've lost. I mean, it's and you said something really important, is there are sides of these addicts that are magical. It's like Jekyll and Hyde. There's some parts of them that are just unbelievably sensitive and caring and talented, and others where there's my God, they just, and they're just dancing with pain, and it kind of keeps them in this whirlpool of not being able to get out, and it's very difficult. Some people get out and others don't, and
Can I ask you? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to like, how does someone overcome that feeling of shame? Because like you were just about to say some do and some don't. What is the determining factor?
Well, you have to resource yourself, and so when you think of like if you're depleted of water, you need to put water in, right? If you're starving, you add food, and so if you're mentally or psychically starving, you need to resource yourself. One of the best ways that I think I have been able to do it for myself is you go be of service to other people because it sounds counterintuitive. If I think my life sucks or I'm all fucked up, if I can go find someone who also is struggling and I can just talk with them or I can be in a room with them or I can be present with the intention and the goal of trying to get out of that, that's sort of the premise of 12 steps in a lot of ways. I've tried to find different studies on this, and there are things that point to, Vietnam vets that would go to therapists and they would not get help, but you put them in a room with other vets that had been through the war, had seen, their comrades, die or in these horrible situations, and they are able to get better when they're in a group setting or just being with um, other vets. What happens is it's the mutual suffering. They're able to connect and have rapport. And as you know, someone who's been sober for many years, you could be around people that you grew up with that were family members, and you don't feel like they get you or you understand them at all. It's like it feels really disconnected. But then you get around other people in recovery and you can have instant rapport sometimes with people that you just met, for like an hour, because you there's like this energetic feeling of understanding that, man, you've been through the trenches, you've been in this shit with me, and we're in and so that it's part of how you approach it. And so, yeah, I mean, I always tell people if you're depressed, go to an animal shelter and volunteer, children's hospital, if you can, a recovery clinic, a burn unit, do volunteer work, go build, homes for people in need. It is fascinating how much, like, one thing we started doing with our Genius Network members. There's a guy named Andre Norman who I've been funding for about 6 years, big black guy that spent 14 years in maximum security prison for first for armed robbery, and then when he was in 2 counts of attempted murder, and he became the #3 gang leader in prison. And I mean, a tough guy. I mean, hurt a lot of people and a total badass. And he spent 2 years in solitary confinement, and he had a spiritual awakening while he was incarcerated. Like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I'm on the road to nowhere. And he came up with this. He couldn't read. He taught himself to read. He learned the law. He would have been in prison forever, but he learned the law, and he made a goal that he would get out and he would go to Harvard, which he did. And he didn't get a degree. He just went to Harvard and became part of justice programs. And he is now one of the highest rated speakers at YPO. He wrote a book called The Ambassador of Hope. I interviewed him and Stedman Graham, Oprah's partner, during the pandemic, because they've done a lot of work in prisons. He runs a prison in North Carolina. He speaks all over the place. I know we've saved lives because we have people that are off the rails. He's boots on the ground dealing with heavy shit. He's like, don't send me to a party. Send me to where people are in chaos. Like, I don't do this kumbaya shit. And he's in charge of a program that is putting content on 650,000 tablets of people that are incarcerated, because we have 2.2 million people in the United States that are incarcerated, and 25% of the world's prisoners are in the United States. We're the highest incarcerating country in the world. And so there's about 4.5 million people that are on parole or probation. So a lot of people, and you can't punish pain out of people. And a lot of these people are addicts, because when people are arrested or thrown in jail, 80 to 90% of the time, drugs and alcohol were involved. That doesn't even include all the other forms of process and behavior addictions. And Andre, he started, these tablets that are on 650,000 tablets. We're putting Genius Recovery and Genius Network content on those tablets so that we can help people that are incarcerated with entrepreneurship and also with recovery, because 40% of people that are incarcerated have committed a a violent crime. 60% have not. So there's a shit ton of people that are just simply, because of their addiction, they have done bad things, which doesn't mean they're bad people. You know, you got to differentiate badness versus bad behavior, because every person has done something bad. You know, luckily, most people have, quote unquote, never been caught. And there's also a lot of bullshit laws. You know, the drugs that kill people are legal. The drugs that save people's lives are illegal. You know, most of the 120,000 plus people that are dying from opiate addictions in the United States, that started with legal opiates prescribed by a doctor. So, you know, who's to say, like, what the hell is causing all of this, right? And so the reason I bring up Andre is that we've started taking people to speak at the women's prison here in Arizona, in Perryville, which is the only women's prison, before Genius Network meetings. And so we take our members there, and these are already successful people financially. I don't define success as just making a lot of money. I know a lot of very rich losers. And I know a lot of people that don't have any money that are some of the most connected, happy, caring people, you know, I've ever met. So money helps. So I don't poo-poo money. You know, you can do a lot of things with money. So I'm a big believer in, you know, give yourself financial resources, because you can help a lot of other people as a result of it. But taking these people to the prisons, it's fucking life-changing. You know, I mean, you know, like you've been there, you know, so they go and they spend, you know, half a day helping in people that are in prison. They're so receptive to, they're more excited about anything that's inspirational than most people that go to seminars or pay to go to groups, because they're so starved for it. And whenever you can contribute like that, and you can add a little bit of sunshine to someone's life, especially if they're in a very difficult place, it actually helps you. It resources you. So how do you get out of shame? Go hang out with other people that are struggling with shame also, and talk about it. Just be present with each other and be focused on getting better. Move your body. The issues are in the tissues. Build yourself up. You know, develop. You have to, if you have low self-esteem, which I've spent most of my life and still do struggle with, lots of self-esteem issues, lots of low self-worth. I have to esteem myself. You have to esteem yourself. You know, in your journal, the Unstoppable Journal, I mean, you have a whole series of things that you have people write every day to set the day up so they can kind of win the day, and then they can reflect on the day. And every time you spend a few minutes writing down and reflecting and being intentional about stuff, you just add another deposit into your self-esteem thing. So go out and be helpful to people. You know, life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. And if you build real appreciation for yourself, you know, I had a young guy ask me, you know, that I was helping with addiction, 24-year-old, smart guy, real smart kid. I mean, he so much more intelligent than I could have hoped to have been at his age. And he asked me last year, I was with him, and he said, "Do you try to be a good person?" And I thought to myself, you know, yeah, I actively try to be a good person. I do things that will, I think, make me better. I don't think of myself as like I'm a good person. I'm only as good as what I'm doing. I could be a real shitty person. And so I got to actively make sure. So anyway, yeah, that's,
No, I love that. I mean, I love that, man. I honestly, I want to be able to do another interview with you, just because I have so many questions for you, man. You have like a wealth of really knowledge from your life experience. But I love that answer. I mean, the main thing for me that helped me to overcome, you know, I had guilt. I didn't have shame. I think deeply ingrained with me was like a strong belief in myself, but I just let that go for so long when I went through dark times. So I had to kind of like remind myself of who I was a little bit. And it was doing things every day that made me feel proud of who I was. And over time, like you said, those daily deposits, it really created that strong belief, like, okay, I'm capable. I'm a good person. I'm doing the right thing. And I think that's huge. I think a lot of people just, whether you're in addiction or not, you don't consistently do things you feel proud of. So you have this doubt or maybe this underlying belief, like, I'm not good enough. And that can change, you know, but the issue about trauma and addiction is so complex. And it's really exciting to see the new research coming out with the plant medicines. I wish that stuff was around, you know, when my parents were growing up and it was more researched. I mean, honestly, in a different way, right? Not the recreational use, but the more, you know, the use that's being done now to change people's, you know, their brain chemistry, man. It's crazy. I saw something where they showed somebody pre psilocybin and then like after, and just the neural networks that were lit up post treatment. It's really incredible, you know.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah. I'll just real quickly. I'm the first person in the world to have before and after brain scans of doing ibogaine and 5-MeO DMT. And Daniel Amen, who did the scans, he was so adamantly against me doing anything like this, and then he started sending me research about how psilocybin was building the brain. And it's very. And Paul Stamets, who's one of the top mushroom guys in the world, he's a friend of mine, and there's fascinating stuff that we're discovering, including genetic links and things like that, which I didn't even get into, but that can be. I'm happy to do a follow up to this too.
Yeah, I would love it. What was the plant medicine you used where you had the brain scans done?
Ibogaine, which comes from the iboga root, and ibogaine is the molecule that is the most effective that I'm aware of for opiate addictions. Very, very effective. It's very intense, though. It's 100 times more powerful than ayahuasca. It was not pleasant. No one, I don't know how anyone would ever want to do it a second time, but I know one guy who's done it 4 times. But it's horrifying. And then 5-MeO DMT, which comes from the Sonoran desert toad. It's a venom in the toad. There's synthetic 5-MeO and there's natural. And so I did the toad medicine, and I'll tell you, it's one hell. And I took a film crew to Tijuana. We filmed it. I've not released the footage yet. At some point I will. That was done years ago, but I'm very careful to just tell people to go out and do plant medicines. I mean, you got to be cautious on any of this stuff. And there's a lot of my friends that go to Burning Man every year. They get high in a camper and they call it a spiritual experience. So, and there are people that have spiritual experiences in campers. So I'm not saying that won't happen. It's just, people are way too flippant about this shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to do it the right way. And I'd like to see that footage though one day when you do release it. I mean, one of the things I was thinking about while I was listening to you is, wow, you've been through so much. Like you've consumed a lot of drugs, you've been through trauma, you've had a crazy journey to this point. Like the fact that you're so sound and complete, it's really incredible. Because you see a lot of people that go through a fraction of what you've gone through, and they can never come back from it, So it's a testament to the human spirit, your will, like who you are. I think it's really incredible. And then doing things like the ibogaine and all this other stuff. It's like, wow, that's probably why you've become the person you have, though, with such a unique perspective. And like, one of the main things I take from you is, I don't know, your attitude about business is really cool too. I think the way that you bring people together and you create these mutually beneficial scenarios and environments for people where everyone wins. I love that. I love that so much because I think especially nowadays, people are just out for themselves and they want to win, win, win. But what I'm learning from being around guys like you and Tommy, it's like there's a whole another level to the way this is done. So I'm personally grateful for you being here, Joe, and just getting to learn from you and always pick your brain. I definitely want you back on. I know you're a busy guy, but I'd love to get you back on because I think just around addiction, just around treatment, or just around business, there's so much we can unpack and discuss. So we'll have to do a round 2 if you're up for it.
Yeah. And if people like this one, and if anyone gets something, to you just contact Sean or let us know at least what of value did you get out of this, and if it's helping people, I'm happy to do it. And yeah, there's a whole that we didn't even talk about business stuff. I would just encourage people to whatever you do business wise. One of my favorite things that I heard early on in my 20s was be nice to the people you meet on the way up. They're the same people you're going to meet on the way down. So I'm just trying to, there's nothing wrong with pursuing opportunities. Just don't be an opportunist. Don't use people, utilize people. Life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. There's a lot of unethical people that are out there, but there's a lot of amazing, wonderful people. So be a really, always think what's in it for them, and whatever you do business wise, learn marketing, learn from others that are been there, done that. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone will dispense advice. But I tend to try to take advice from people that have done it and are doing it, and they're doing it with ethics. They don't leave scorched earth. They're genuinely. Who becomes a close friend of mine is I look at people that are more powerful. How do they treat people that are less powerful than them? So that's a real gauge. Go to dinner with someone. How do they treat the server? Do they thank people when they open up a door for them? I mean, just basic human courtesy tells you so much about how somebody operates. So I don't develop relationships with assholes. And if someone shows the sign of being a jerk, I'll give them grace because I have to work with a lot of addicts, but I don't have to have them be my close inner circle friends.
Yeah. No, I love it. Thank you for that takeaway, man. And I want to post all your links to your books down below and the Genius Network as well in the description on this video. Cause I'm reading, what was it? The Giver Takes, and how's that title go? I keep messing it up.
Yeah. It's Life Gives to the Giver. And
That's
people
right.
can get that book for free at joesfreebook.com. They can,
there we go. joesfreebook.com. And the next one I want to read is The Miracle Morning for Addicts, because I read Al Helrod's book, The Miracle Morning, when I was incarcerated. And I started applying that same concept to my morning routine. It really was a pivotal moment in my personal development. So it's so cool how you teamed up with him to create this book. And I think there was a third person, but I'm excited to dive into that one and share it and all the other stuff you're doing out there, man. So I appreciate you.
You got it, Sean. Well, thank you. And I wish everyone out to and if anyone's struggling with addiction, it's geniusrecovery.org. It's an educational platform, and there's just tons of free resources there and a great blog. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, my man. Absolutely. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.